Council of Elders had convened in the grand chamber high above the crystalline city, the walls shimmering with 1,000 subtle colors that shifted with the moods of the speakers. Their discussions were usually measured, deliberate, and unhurried, yet today an unusual tension hung in the air, a premonition they couldn't identify. A small alert blip had appeared on the central observation grid, a faint signature in the void beyond their borders, almost negligible, almost ignorable, yet unmistakably artificial. Dr. Yalen, the chief xenoscientist, was the first to recognize its pattern. It was not the usual drift of space debris or natural cosmic phenomena, but a signal repeating in an irregular yet intentional rhythm. Unlike anything recorded before, it pulsed in complex bursts that hinted at intelligence. The Council's youngest member, Terra, leaned forward, eyes wide with both excitement and fear. What if it was a message from beyond the known systems? He whispered. Could it be a call for help? A challenge or a warning? Councillor Maris waved a hand dismissively, arguing that the grid often misread anomalies. That blip was insignificant, he insisted. The universe was full of random noise, and assigning meaning to every disturbance was a folly, yet even as he spoke, the signal repeated, now with an intensity that pressed upon their minds, like a distant drumbeat trying to be understood. Dr. Yalen's voice grew tense, pointing out subtle shifts in the energy signatures. This wasn't random, she insisted. Whoever, or whatever, sent this knew exactly what they were doing. The chamber fell silent as they debated the signal's origin. One faction insisted on a military response, preparing a fleet to investigate and, if necessary, to strike preemptively. Another urged caution, advocating for observation and data collection. The debate raged for hours, yet the signal continued to pulse with increasing complexity, as though taunting them to understand its meaning. Terry's eyes never left the grid, feeling the unmistakable weight of urgency embedded in the pulses. Something was coming, he realized, something that demanded attention not for diplomacy, not for conquest, but for survival. When night fell over the crystalline city, the signal had grown in strength, echoing across their communications arrays. The Council's elders were no longer debating whether it mattered, but why they hadn't recognized it sooner. The warning had been clear to anyone willing to listen, yet human or sentient. Pride had blinded them to the subtlety of the message. And now, as the stars beyond shimmered with hidden threats, the first true pangs of fear took root in their hearts. The universe had whispered, and the Council had ignored it. At the next cycle, the signal had transformed from a faint pulse into a sweeping wave of energy, washing over the edges of their territory with a silent insistence. Sensors picked up the approach of enormous objects, massive enough to warp space slightly as they moved. They were not ships, at least not in the conventional sense, but constructs of a design the Council had never encountered, sleek, angular, almost organic in their geometry. The edges of their surfaces shimmered as though bending light around them, making them appear larger, smaller, and constantly shifting. Panic began to ripple through the Council as the constructs halted at the borders, hovering with a deliberate stillness that defied understanding. Every attempt at communication was met with silence, yet the signal continued, now layered with a richness that implied observation, judgment, and perhaps disappointment. Dr. Yalen hypothesized that the signal was a warning, a test of awareness, one they had failed to heed until it became undeniable. Terra spoke with a quiet urgency, insisting they prepare not for battle, but for understanding, for humility. The Council, for the first time in centuries, was forced to admit that pride could no longer dictate their response. Military fleets were mobilized anyway, a gesture more of tradition than strategy. Ships glided through space, engines humming in tense synchrony, but the constructs did not react. They observed, calculated, and waited. Each Council member felt an unspoken pressure, a realization that their civilization's survival depended on listening, not striking. In the silence of the observation deck, Yalen whispered, "They're not here to conquer, they're here to warn us." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread, connecting them to a reality they had ignored. The signal finally resolved into a form they could interpret, not as language, but as a series of images and sensations that flooded the minds of all who focused on it. Worlds consumed by fire, oceans boiling, civilizations collapsing under their own hubris. All outcomes traced a single origin: the misuse of energy beyond comprehension. The constructs moved closer, projecting a physical manifestation of the warning, a holographic sequence of the catastrophic events they sought to prevent. The Council understood at last. This was not a threat, but a lesson delivered in the starkest terms possible. Attempts to probe or interact were futile. Every direct approach met with a psychic wall. Yet observation was allowed, almost painfully. The constructs revealed the scale of possible consequences. Every simulation of neglect ended in annihilation. Every sign of cooperation offered a path to survival. Terra realized the message was also an invitation, a chance to evolve beyond the limitations of pride and fear. Yalen documented every projection, her hands shaking as she tried to encode the warning for those who might come after. The Council was forced into consensus, humility replacing arrogance. They had been given a second chance, but the margin was thin, and understanding alone would not be enough. Days passed with no change in the constructs, positions, their presence a constant silent reminder of the consequences of inaction. Councillor Maris finally spoke, voice barely a whisper. "We understand now." The words were simple, yet carried the weight of an entire civilization's reckoning. Meetings shifted from posturing to planning. The Council sought solutions to prevent the projected disasters, redirecting energy, reconsidering expansion, and embracing unity in ways they had long ignored. Terra worked with scientists and philosophers alike, translating the constructs' warnings into actionable reforms. Last, a decision was made, not by force, not by military might, but by collective will. The Council broadcast a signal back, not a declaration of power, but a commitment to change. The constructs paused, as if acknowledging that the lesson had been received. Then, as suddenly as they had arrived, they began to recede into the void, leaving behind a subtle echo of their presence, a gentle hum that reminded the Council of the fragile balance they had narrowly preserved. In their absence, the signal faded. But the warning remained, etched into the very culture and decisions of the Council. Every member understood that this was not an end, but a beginning, a covenant with the universe and with themselves.